What's up, carp freaks, and welcome to my very first video diary. Today I am in North Yorkshire on a small day ticket pond, not a million miles from where I live actually, and I'm here for two reasons. Firstly, to try and catch a carp, and secondly, to kickstart this series with a look back at what I've been getting up to in January. This is something I've wanted to do for such a long time now. So many of you ask me what I get up to when I'm not filming the challenge, when I'm not out doing magazine features. So this is going to be an ongoing thing where every month I'll keep you up to date at what I've been doing in the typical month of my life, if you like. So I think the best thing to do is for me to finish this brew, and we'll start right at the beginning on the 1st of January. Well, at the start of the winter, I'd set myself a silly little target of trying to catch a 2-pound grayling. For me, a grayling kind of epitomises winter fishing, and recently my Facebook and Instagram newsfeed was almost cluttered with the sights of big grayling. I was beginning to feel a little bit left out that I hadn't caught one. So I'd managed to find out about a river in Yorkshire that holds very big grayling. One stretch in particular, the average size seemed to be 2-pound plus. So I'd got the venue sorted, and what better time to go and try and catch myself a 2-pound grayling than on the 1st of January. So today is the 1st of January, Happy New Year, and I'm carrying on with a bit of a tradition of mine, and that's being on the bank on New Year's Day. I always like to start as I mean to go on. I am in Yorkshire on the banks of a beautiful chalk stream which holds some very big grayling. This stretch has produced grayling to just under £4 in recent years, and as we all know, there is nothing more carpy than a big grayling in winter. So fingers crossed we can catch one. Now, because this was my first trip to the river, I didn't really know where to start. The stretch itself is about a mile long, and ordinarily it's absolutely crystal clear. You can see the riverbed, but the night before this session we had quite a lot of overnight rain and the water was pretty coloured. Now, the surface flow pretty much looked the same everywhere, so it was hard to tell what was the slow deep pools and what was the shallow runs. So most of the first half of the day was just spent around dropping a float in the swim, just to try and get an idea of the depth. Some of the stretches were just inches deep, and then obviously you had the deeper pools in between. But it took me a while to get my bearings, but eventually I did manage to find a nice pool, but trout were just being an absolute nightmare.
I've literally lost count the amount of these I've had today. Must be 25 or more.
I'd lost count of the amount of trout I'd caught, and they're just such swim wreckers. They're leaping around all over the place, just trashing the swim, and I just think, well, while all this disturbance is going on, is there any chance of catching a grayling as well? Thankfully though, there was. I managed to find another pool, and I think it was probably only on my third run down, having not had any trouty action, float went under, and there was no doubt about it, this was not a trout. The fight is incredible. People always ask me, what do the fight like? They're not big fish, are they? You're fishing for 2-pound fish, but once they get in the flow, they sort of hold their own, and they become quite a job to actually get them moving again. It almost feels like they're snagged up in the stream of weed. But yeah, eventually slid the net under it, and here's a little clip of what that looked like.
Well, have a look at that. I haven't weighed it yet, but I do believe that is my new PB grayling. I've never really caught any big grayling before. I've never caught a 2-pounder. I think my biggest ever grayling is probably about £1.25 pounds, and I'm pretty sure it's over that. So yeah, what a start to the year. So here we are. This is what I came for, and what a start to the new year. New PB grayling, £2 9 ounces. Absolutely over the moon.
So there you go, that was my first trip of the year, first trip to the river, and I'd got my target. £2 9 ounces, it was my PB grayling by over £1. And yeah, I was over the moon, but at the same time I was a tiny bit disappointed that I managed to get it quite so quickly. So I thought, well, seeing as I'm kind of halfway now to catching a 3-pounder, well, more than halfway, I might as well just shift the goalpost a little bit. And my new target was now a 3-pound grayling. This stretch of river has done them to almost £4 in the past. So there was every chance that I could just push on a little bit and get a 3. I mean, that would be, for me, a fish of a lifetime. A few days after my grayling session, I had delivery of some new fish for my lake. Some fish from John Patton Fisher's Pond, C4s, so four summer carp. These were the biggest C4s I've ever had delivery of. Most of them were over £15, so proper beasts really. Now, just to kind of bring you all up to speed what's been happening at my lake has taken up every bit of my spare time this winter. And the reason being, last year I had an absolute disaster. I had a fish kill at my lake. Now, my dad and I dug the lake in the 1994. We dug it, and a lot of the fish that were swimming around were stocked in the 90s. Quite a lot of them were just that big. But without going into massive amount of detail and boring you all, it was basically a bacterial issue. It wasn't a disease, anything like that. We had a build-up of harmful bacteria which attacked the carp's gills, and we lost 50% of the stock, and that 50% was pretty much made up of the bigger fish. Even just talking about it now, I'm sort of I can picture everything all again in my mind. It was absolutely devastating. The only saving grace was the 2 biggest fish in the lake survived, but that was about it. We lost probably 8 30s, and most of the fish that were 27s to 29s that would have been £30 this year, they perished too. When it happened, there was a part of me just thought, you know what, forget it. Just bin it off, walk away from it, just forget it. How can you recover from that? I mean, them fish have taken all that time to grow. And I was just ready just to pack it all in. But then I kind of, after a couple of weeks, I kind of stopped feeling sorry for myself, and stopped behaving a bit like a brat, and thought, well, you know, I'm in a very privileged position to have what I have. Instead of moaning, then, you know, get on with it and rebuild. And that's what I've been doing. But in order to move forward, the amount of work, it's almost like having to start all over again. What I've had to do is clear about an acre of dense woodland to dig another pond, a stock pond adjacent to the existing lake. And then the next plan is to drain down the lake completely, move the surviving fish into the new pond after that's been fenced, and then de-silt, strip back all the silt and all the slimy green blanket weed, which we are pretty sure is the catalyst as to what's happened. But it's going to take, well, it has taken up pretty much all my spare time, all my effort and all my money as well. But I'm sure in the long run, I think it will be better for what's, well, not what's happened, but what's going to happen. So every cloud and all that, I think I've got to look positive, because if I didn't, I'd probably start crying. But no, I think I'm looking forward to the future, put it that way. Well, having spent that weekend in the Yorkshire Dales exploring with the family, my thoughts once again turned to grayling, and I couldn't wait to get back on the river. Well, in the lead up to this session, we'd once again had lots of overnight rain, and the river was much more pacey than on my first trip. So I started off using a maggot feeder. If nothing else, it would ensure that the maggots were getting down to the riverbed and in the area where I want them to be. It didn't really seem to be the maggot feeder. I think I caught a couple of trout from a couple of pools, but the results just weren't the same. I wasn't catching even as many trout as I was on the previous trip.
Well, here I am back on the chalk stream in search of grayling. It's been over a week since I was here on New Year's Day when I caught that 2 pound 9 ounce. I would have been back down much sooner, but we've had that much rain, the river's just been flooded and it's been unfishable really, so it's the first opportunity I've had to get back down. There's still a little tinge of colour in the river, and last night was the first night we didn't have a frost in a few nights, so not that it matters for grayling. I think the colder the better for grayling, but conditions are looking good anyway. I always prefer it when it's a little bit overcast, so let's see what we can do today.
So swap back to the float. Went up, just used a much bigger float to allow me to control it better through the swim, and in the next 2 trots down I caught 2 grayling and 2 trots, and once again one of them was quite large.
Take a look at that. That is huge. That's got to be a PB, surely. Check that out. 2 pound 10 ounces, a PB by an ounce. But just looking at its dorsal fin there, that's got a chunk out of its dorsal. The fish I caught last week, that also had a damaged dorsal fin. I'm not 100% sure if it's a different fish or not. It could be a repeat capture, which I never really like doing. But it has got a blind eye on this side, so the fish I caught last week didn't. It could be an old injury. It could have happened during the week. There's a few cormorants on the river, so who knows. But either way, I'm absolutely made up.
Well, having checked the photos, it turned out it was a completely different fish. So that was 2 PBs in 2 sessions. I felt like I was on a roll. I was learning loads about the river, and I was sure there'd be more chances to come that session. Now, I know you can never say for certain, but that fish did feel much bigger than anything I'd caught from there previously. It was certainly more powerful. So, as you can imagine, I was absolutely gutted. But now I think I'm going to get the kettle on, and I'm going to recast these rods with fresh PVA bags and maggots, see if we can provoke a bite from somewhere. Well, I've been fishing a couple of hours now. When I got here, there was definitely signs of feeding fish. I was getting a few liners, but since then, nothing's really happened. I've not seen any signs of any feeding activity. The liners have stopped. So I'm just swapping over to a zig. I guess my 2 go-to tactics that I would use in the winter months are either maggots or zigs. Well, I'm combining them both here. I'm fishing a maggoty zig. I've just tied up a 2-foot zig with one of the red and black zigger liners, and I've just threaded on 4 maggots there just by threading on 4 maggots onto a piece of mono with a sewing needle, and then just passing the needle underneath the loop on the zigger liner and just tying it to that loop. Dead simple. Just that extra little bit of movement I think can often provoke a take when a normal zig would fail. It's worked really well for me. Hopefully it'll work today. Well, a couple of days later when I was back at the river, and this time conditions were absolutely perfect. The river was dropping, the colour was dropping, it was overcast, it was absolutely bang on. And pretty much right from the word go, the session got off to a flying start. I think it was in my first 2 or 3 trots down, I caught fish, including 2 2-pounders in 2 casts.
You ready for this? Check that out for a brace of grayling. The top one, £2, 13 ounces. The bottom one, £2, 5. Absolutely buzzing with that. So, the third grayling of the session. Add another 2-pounder, £2, 1 ounce. What an amazing session this has been.
Now, another reason why I kind of turned my attentions to grayling this winter, apart from the fact they look awesome, is because of the time I had available. Because of the workload that I've got going on down at my lake, I knew it was going to be very, very difficult this winter for me to have 2 consecutive days so that I could do a 24-hour or 36-hour session for carp, where for grayling I could just go out for 5-6 hours and then come back, and then I could have the next day working at my lake. Now, since the stock pond was dug before Christmas, one of the main jobs I've been doing is clearing woodland around the pond so that I can put the otter fence up, and that has just been so time consuming. It doesn't take me long to chop all the trees down, but clearing them all away when they're all just in a heap, it just takes up so much time, so many man hours, and that's mainly what I've been doing. All the days I haven't been grayling fishing, I've been down at my lake working.
So behind me is my stock pond, which we had dug just before Christmas. It's about a third, maybe half an acre in size, but there's no fish in it at the moment. That's because it isn't fenced, it's not protected in any way. So my job today is to clear some of the woodland, some of the trees behind me, ready for the fence going up tomorrow.
Well, I'd finally been given a date when the fencing company was going to come and start work on the otter fence, and at least then I had a schedule to work to. So I had a week set aside where I could work down the lake, clear all the trees, clear all the bushes and shrubs and everything, ready for the guys coming in with the tractors and machinery so they can get all the fence and the posts in. Just so happened that week coincided with the best weather we had all winter. We had a mega low pressure come in. It was warm, wet, windy. I mean, even in the northeast, we're having daytime temperatures. It hit 15.5 degrees down there one day. So amazing conditions. Fish were getting caught right across the country, and I'm down there chopping down trees all week. I just realised I've got my glasses on. Do I look a bit of a No, you look all right. Well, having worked down the lake all week, I was absolutely itching to get back out on the bank. I didn't have enough time though to go and spend the days grayling fishing. Plus most of the rivers in the area were absolutely flooded anyway. But there's one small river near me which actually seems to fish better in those conditions. So I headed down there for a bit of a social with my friends Kaylee and Adam, and just sharing one rod between us, we caught about 15 pounds of dace chublets and a couple of small grayling in just a few hours. So although we weren't catching anything massive, it was still a great way to get that fishing fix. With another trip to the river planned the next week, I had to first go to my local tackle shop to get stocked up on a few supplies. Now I've been using this shop first liner on that left-hand rod, isn't it? Now I've been using this shop ever since I was a kid, and it's like an Aladdin's cave. It's absolutely jam-packed with gear. Plus, because they cater so well for match anglers, the bait is always absolutely first class. And I don't think it matters what species you're fishing for, it always pays to use the best bait you can get your hands on. A couple of days later, I was able to get back down the river, and when I opened the front door that morning, despite there being no mention of it on the weather forecast, I was greeted by 6 inches of snow, which it didn't really bother me. I knew it wouldn't affect the grayling too much at all, and if anything, I was quite looking forward to catching a nice big grayling in the snow. So after driving nearly 2 hours to the river, I got to within about 10 miles of where I needed to be, and the snow just suddenly ended, and it seemed that everything that fell as snow near where I live had fallen as rain over there. The fields were flooded, the roads were flooded, all the ditches were just flooded, and this wasn't looking good at all.
Well, actually, the river is nowhere near as bad as I was expecting. It is coloured, there's no doubt about that. There is a lot of extra colour, a lot of extra water in it, and it is fishable. I don't think it's going to be particularly productive, but there's no more rain forecast today. The colour could start dropping as we go on, so yeah, it's taken me 2 hours to get here. I may as well get the rods out and see how we go. I'm struggling to keep a rod in the water for any more than a minute at the moment. There's that much debris and that coming downstream. It's just gathering either on the line or on the rig itself. It's a bit of a nightmare. I think I'm completely wasting my time here, really.
So with the fishing an absolute non-starter, I decided to bin it off and go home and build a snowman with the kids instead.
So, what's this you're building?
A snowman.
A snowman?
Yeah.
At the moment, it doesn't look quite like a snowman.
Because it isn't finished.
No. At the moment, it looks like something else.
I don't know.
That looks awesome, doesn't it now?
Well, something pretty momentous happened to me in January. I turned 40. Yeah. Now, originally I did have big plans for my 40th birthday. I wanted to have a bit of a tour across Italy. But with all the work that's going on down at my lake, I just couldn't afford to have a few days away. Plus, my girlfriend is setting up her own business, so the timing just wasn't quite right. Instead, my girlfriend, she spoilt me. We booked into a real nice hotel near me, had a nice meal the night before, and she also got me a track day. I absolutely love my cars, so I can't wait to do that. She got me a really cool cake too. So yeah, it was nice. It was like a low-key, very family sort of orientated birthday. It was great. I did manage one more session on the river in January for grayling, and once again it turned out to be a very good trip.
So I'm back at the river again. It seems ages since I was here last, although it's only been a week. But we've had that much rain, it just hasn't been fishable until now, really. The water level is still high. It's really tanking through, actually. And there's also quite a lot of colour, but I quite like it like that. I prefer it with that hint of colour and a dropping river than if it was crystal clear. So conditions actually don't look bad at all today. I'm going to start off with a maggot feeder. Because of that extra flow, it'll allow me to build up the swim, if nothing else, and get some maggots down to the bottom where they need to be, and then we can take it from there and see what happens. Well, after being on the feeder all morning. I switched over to the float, and on what was probably, I think, my 3rd or 4th run down, I've got this cracking grayling. It's certainly over £2, and it just goes to show how a change in tactics can often bring about a quick result. Well, while the float rod is out of the water, I thought I'd just quickly go through the trotting setup I've been using. I've got here a centre pin reel, and that's loaded with a fine diameter 5.5 pound line. It's 0.16 mil, so it's like the same diameter as a standard 3 pound line, I guess. The float, this here is a 5AA Avon float, but instead of using split shot, I've been using an Olivet weight. An Olivet's like an inline weight, the line runs through the centre, and it's just secured in place with 2 small split shot. The reason for me using that is, one, it's much neater than a bulk of shot, and also it's kinder on the line. I always think biting or pinching a large shot on a fine diameter line, it can cause a weak point, and when you're playing hard fighting fish on a light line in a strong current, I really don't want to have to worry about that. Also, because it's smoother than a group of shot, so if that lead should bounce on the bottom over gravel or get caught in the stream or weed, for example, I think it's more likely just to come free. I can just flick the rod, flick the float, and it'll dislodge. Whereas a group of shot, I think it can get snagged or caught up much more easy, and it's harder to move. So yeah, that's why I like them. The hook links, I've been using the Power Micron. I kind of go-to as being the 0.145 mil, which is just over £4. But I've got finer diameters in the box as well, should the fish be a bit finicky. And all my hook links are stored here on one of the Matrix hook link boxes. There's nothing worse when you've got really cold hands and you're trying to fiddle around tying up really small hooks on light lines. So I've got all my hook links there, all stored in the box. Enough really to last me the entire winter. Whenever I've been bored at home, I've just been sat tying rigs, and there's a variety of hook sizes there and breaking strain, so I've pretty much got everything covered for every eventuality. And I'm actually just going to tie on a fresh hook link now, so I'll do that, and then we'll get the rod back in the water.
Well, this river has certainly been very kind to me over the past few weeks. We've got another cracking brace of 2-pounders, the bottom one weighing £2.5, the top one £2.12 ounces. Absolutely loved my grayling fishing, but I think the carp rods are calling. This might very well be my last grayling session of the winter, but if it is, what a brilliant way to end. Well, I think it's fair to say that January has been a very graylingy sort of month, and I've absolutely loved my grayling fishing this winter. But at the same time, I have really missed my carp fishing. But with my days being quite limited, the grayling fishing has very much suited me. And it's given me a great chance to fish for something that I've never caught before. I mean, yes, I've caught grayling before, but until this year, I'd never caught a 2-pounder. And at the end of January, my tally stood at 10 grayling over £2. So I'm really pleased with that. Well, I thought I'd managed to save a blank right at the last minute. All the gear was packed away, loaded into the van, except for the rods. They were just laid on the ground, and I just noticed one of the tips bounce a few times, picked up the rod, and we've got a chub. So not really the end to January or this video I was hoping for, but I hope you've enjoyed watching what I've been getting up to this past month. February looks set to be very hectic indeed. So if you join me next time, I can tell you a bit more about what I've been up to.
You've been river fishing the whole of January, and you come and try and catch a carp, and you actually catch a chub.
I know. What are the chances of that?
What is that about?